I have my cue that it is 1 o'clock Pacific time here. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. And we are so thrilled to have both Isabella and Rachel from the Oceanwise Sustainable Seafood team here with us today. And so I would first like to start by saying how grateful I am to be here in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And since time immemorial, they have been using the practice of observations and storytelling and oral history in their scientific work here in the Lower Mainland. And both Oceanwise Research and education are so grateful to be inspired and learning how to incorporate that in our programs and practices and being able to share that with you. And so we're really excited to have a great presentation all about sustainable seafood. I think it's a great way to kick off the long weekend for many of us here in Canada. Hopefully, as people are thinking about maybe what their menu items might be over the next few days, this will give you some great support in how to do that successfully and sustainably. And so without further ado, I'd love to turn it over to Isabella and Rachel to say hello. And that's great. We're seeing your presentation coming up here on the screen. And welcome to both of you.
Thank you so much, of course, to online learning, and also thank you so much to everyone who's come out and has demonstrated interest digitally coming out to learn about the Oceanwise Seafood Program, a small but mighty program that we're all extremely proud to be part of. So we're here today to dive a bit deeper into the science that we use, and then we're going to connect that to how we work with Oceanwise Seafood partners to encourage and change consumer as well as industry behavior. And Rachel's just going to quickly introduce herself, and then I will also introduce myself as well.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Rachel Chudnow, and I am the fisheries lead for the science team at Oceanwise Seafood based in Vancouver.
And my name is Isabella Sulpizio, and I am the accounts coordinator for Eastern Canada based out of our Toronto office. So we will have Rachel start us off by highlighting the science side of things. So take it away, Rachel.
Awesome. All right, so to get things started, I thought I would kick off the conversation by defining how Oceanwise Seafood characterizes sustainability. The word sustainable can relate to many things, from social justice to economics to the environment. For the purpose of our conversation, Oceanwise classifies sustainable seafood as products that come from fishing or aquaculture, also known as fish farms, that ensure the long-term health and abundance of the species that are targeted by harvest, and that reduce the impacts on the surrounding environment to ensure that marine ecosystems can continue to support life into the future. Next slide, please, Isabel. Thank you. All Oceanwise recommendations come from written assessments of sustainability. These assessments are specific to the species, harvest method, and location of harvest. For the purpose of wild capture fisheries, which will be the focus of my talk today, Oceanwise assessments utilize a written standard to score sustainability on 4 main criteria, including the health of target fish stocks, the impacts of fishing on other species through bycatch, the effectiveness of fisheries regulations and management, and finally, the impacts of fishing on surrounding habitats and the environment. Each of these criteria are assessed on numerous components. To highlight this complexity and to maximize the time we have to chat today, I've chosen to focus on bycatch and its impacts on sustainability. So what is bycatch? It is the portion of catch that is returned to the water for economic, legal, or other reasons. It includes things you may be familiar with, like incidental capture of turtles, sharks, marine mammals, or birds, as well as species of fish or invertebrates that were not the target of fishing. It also includes undersized individuals of the species being targeted, like juvenile fish. The amount of bycatch fishing activity incurs is dependent on a number of specifics of the fishery. Broadly speaking, harvest method is one of the largest determining factors. To make things super confusing, some harvest methods are highly sustainable in some places or at some times and not sustainable at others. And I'll try to give some examples of this complexity in the next few minutes. When talking bycatch, harvest methods are categorized as either being selective, in that they primarily catch the species and size of individuals that are the target of harvest, or unselective, methods that capture whatever species and individuals interact with the fishing gear. Some of the most selective harvest methods that are out there in the world include harpoon and diving. Harpoon, shown on the left, is common for species like swordfish and tuna, while diving, shown on the right, can be used to catch invertebrates like clams and lobsters, and fish, though the latter is more common for subsistence fishing, or fishing for food for direct consumption. These methods are incredibly selective and have near zero bycatch because the harvester directly identifies an individual to target and can ensure it is the correct species and size to catch. Fishing using pots and trap nets, which are shown on the upper left-hand corner, are also highly selective. These gears are baited to lure organisms to enter the enclosure and make it extremely difficult or impossible for them to escape. The gear size or trap size, configuration, and bait choice vary depending on the target species. Bycatch also varies, but is minimized by bait selection, choice of mesh size, and the presence of escape ports, which are chosen to allow undersized and non-target species a way out of the trap or net. Pots and traps are used to catch bottom-dwelling crustaceans, such as crabs and lobsters, as well as some species of fish, like eels and sablefish, while trap nets are used to catch a variety of species like salmon. Hook and line fishing can vary from highly selective methods like pole and line, shown here on the left, where fish are harvested one by one, and harvesters can remove non-target species from the lines and choose bait specific to the target species to increase selectivity. In contrast to long line fishing, shown on the right, which can be highly unselective. Gear is composed of a long line with a series of shorter lines attached to baited hooks, which are floated on the water in the upper portion of the water column, or sunk to the seafloor. Though gear can be made more selective by choice of hook size, location, and long line length, this method is often highly selective in that target fish and any other species passing by are caught if they take the bait. Industrial longlines can also be incredibly long in length, ranging on average of about 45 kilometers. Both harvest methods are common for both tuna and swordfish. Fishing with nets can also vary from being highly selective to non-selective. A gill net, shown on the left, is a wall of netting that hangs in the water column or is pinned to the seafloor. The net's mesh size is designed to allow fish to get only their head through the netting, but not their body. The fish's gills then get caught in the mesh as the fish tries to back out. A variety of regulations and factors impact the selectivity of this method. Gill netting salmon can be quite selective. The timing and location of harvest can greatly minimize bycatch. While open ocean gill netting is often a poster child for bycatch, as non-target species including marine turtles, mammals, seabirds, and endangered fish can easily become entangled in the netting. Target species include fish like salmon, cod and haddock, flounder, sharks, and tuna. A purse seine is a wall of netting that is set in a ring around a school of fish. The top of the net floats on the surface, while a weighted line at the bottom is drawn up, pursing the net closed to prevent fish from escaping by swimming downward. Purse seines can vary in size from a few meters to over 2 kilometers long, according to the vessel and the target species. Purse seining is a non-selective fishing method that captures everything it surrounds. That said, the selectivity of this method can be improved by choosing specific times and areas for harvest. In addition, historically, dolphin pods were often used as a natural cue to aid harvesters toward areas of abundant schooling fish, called setting on dolphins. Once netting has been set, the encircled marine mammals are unable to escape and can become entangled, injured, or stressed. When you see dolphin-safe tuna, it implies that this method was not used. Targeted species for Purse seine includes schooling fish of all sizes, everything from small sardines to large tunas. And the final harvest method I wanted to highlight today, certainly not the last of all the harvest methods out there, because there are hundreds and hundreds of different ways to catch fish and modifications to gear that exist. Trawl nets vary in length, mesh size, material, and tow speed depending on the target species, although industrial scale trawlers can be immense. These methods are unselective, with cones of netting dragged either through the water column or against the sea floor, trapping any organism they encounter that is large enough not to pass through the mesh. Bottom trawling also has the potential to cause substantial damage to habitats if it is dragged over complex habitats like reefs, which are critical cover for juvenile and adult fish. Trawling captures species like squid, shrimp, crab, flounder, as well as pelagic or open water schooling fish like sardines. Bycatch has negative impacts on both the environment and harvesters. Incidental catch of mammals, sharks and rays, seabirds, and endangered, threatened, and protected fish and invertebrate species has large conservation impacts, reducing the potential for these species to recover, and which can result in either local or global extinctions. When bycatch includes juvenile organisms of the species being targeted, this impacts the long-term viability of harvest, as young fish that are caught before they have a chance to breed cannot contribute to the next generation. It's important to note that bycatch is also bad for harvesters. Hauling bycatch is dangerous, takes time, and causes damage to fishing gear. Gear modifications, closed areas, and more selective fishing methods can help reduce this waste. In fact, a lot of time and energy is spent discovering and implementing ways to reduce bycatch. These modifications can be incredibly simple, such as changing the shape of a long-line fishing hook from a J-shaped hook shown on the left to a circle-shaped hook shown on the right. This simple change makes it difficult for some non-target species like turtles and birds to be hooked, as there is a mismatch between their anatomy and the hook shape. Another simple solution for pot and trap fishing is the use of escape rings, which can give a way out for undersized or non-target species. And in the case of bird interactions with long lines, the additions of streamers to the line, which serve to deter birds from coming close to the gear, like a scarecrow or that CD you have hanging from your garden. Solutions can also be highly technical. For example, gill nets often are attached to sonic pingers. These pingers emit sound that alert marine mammals to the presence of the net, which would otherwise be invisible to them within the water column. Trawlers often employ escape hatches, which give a way for turtles and other species that are not the target of harvest to get out of a net. And finally, a really cool innovation for long lines is shown here. The time a sinking long line is near the surface is when the most bycatch is caught, with significantly less bycatch once the hook is at depth. This bottle-shaped device is an amazing solution. It essentially blocks the hook so no organism can bite it, and when the hook hits a certain depth, the pressure causes the device to pop off, making the hook accessible for the target species. I will now pass things over to Isabella, who's going to take you through the other side of Oceanwise Seafood's work. Take it away, Isabella.
Thank you, Rachel. That was super informative and very, very interesting. I especially love the last example of the hook. It's exciting to see different innovations happening within the seafood industry all the time. So now we would like to step back a bit from the science side and discuss how the accounts team utilizes our science to both educate consumers and communicate with the seafood industry to help tell a better and more sustainable food story. From the ocean to your plate, the Oceanwise Seafood Program works directly with members of the seafood industry with the goal of making a sustainable seafood choice an easy and accessible one across Canada and beyond. But how do we do that? As you know, if you go to most restaurants, the menu does not tell a sustainable seafood story. And oftentimes, the menu generically lists shrimp, salmon, or tuna with little to no information on where that species has come from or how it has been harvested. As Rachel has just demonstrated, there is a lot more that goes into our seafood than we realize. And by being provided with choices, we can decide to purchase seafood that has less of an impact on the surrounding environment. Working with chefs to educate them on the seafood that they put on their menus or build their menus around is the first step in ensuring that we are providing these choices to consumers. But it also goes much further than that. In addition to chefs in the restaurants, we also want to engage with other actors within the seafood supply chain, such as producers as well as suppliers. So producers are the ones who are harvesting and farming these options. So it's important to be encouraging them and supporting sustainable harvesting practices over unsustainable ones. And for suppliers, these are the ones who are making these options available to their regions. So by working with them, we can help them highlight and promote their sustainable seafood options to then amplify those positive choices for their customers. With retailers, this is the group of individuals who is selling seafood to the portion of the population who choose to eat seafood at home rather than going to a restaurant. So we can help them identify which options are sustainable in their seafood counters now, and we can also help them moving forward to find and build better seafood counters moving forward. And finally, with culinary schools, we can educate their students on issues that are facing the world's oceans and highlight the complexity of seafood before they get into the real culinary world and start choosing different species to build their menus around. For those of you who are unaware, the Oceanwise Seafood Program started when a chef approached a marine biologist at the Vancouver Aquarium. Chef Rob Clark wanted a benchmark that he could follow to ensure that he could tell his sustainable seafood story to his customers in a simple and approachable way. And we have taken that strong foundation and grown into a national program with over 785 partners spanning thousands of locations, with relationships across Canada as well as around the world. Using the Oceanwise seafood symbol in fish counters, on product sheets, and on menus, we've been able to demonstrate that it is possible to clearly promote sustainable seafood options for actors across the supply chain, all the way down to the consumer. Seeing the Oceanwise seafood symbol on a product is not only telling people that this option is a sustainable choice, but it is also highlighting that if there are sustainable choices out there, there are also unsustainable ones. And we think it's important to then provide a space for those individuals to learn more about everything sustainable seafood related, if they are curious. Through our website, our partners, our consumers, and everyone in between can learn about the reasons why we do this important work and discover information on sustainable and unsustainable seafood options. With over 1,300 recommendations up on our website, we have endless information to share and educate when it comes to sustainable seafood. We also have videos on sustainable seafood, links to our ever-growing aquablog content, and recipes that you can try at home. In addition, we have an ever-growing partner map. So regardless of where you are, you can hop on our partner map and find businesses that are selling sustainable seafood close to you. When working closely with our partners, the first thing that we want to do is get an understanding of the type of seafood that they currently sell. Working with these species, we can gather data on the harvesting or farming method and the region that it came from in order to determine if it would qualify as an Oceanwise recommended option. Not getting too much into the science, but an Oceanwise option has to meet a minimum score to qualify based upon the information Rachel touched upon in the beginning of this presentation. So once we determine if the option is Oceanwise or not, we can then share that information with our partner and provide them with a list of sustainable seafood alternatives, so they also have the choice to include as many sustainable seafood dishes as possible. This process is of great value for several reasons. One, it clearly demonstrates which options are sustainable, which shows our partners the good work that they are already doing. And two, it clearly illustrates why some options are not sustainable by listing impacts on other species, the target population, or the surrounding environment. So the partner can then decide if they still want to have that option available to their customers as well. When working closely with our partners, we also want to ensure that their entire team is aware of the Oceanwise Seafood Program, the commitments that their business made, and take pride in working for a business that places value on promoting and celebrating sustainable seafood options to their customer base. we offer many different training opportunities for our partners that cover a range of topics. We have certification and species-specific webinars, consumer guides, and our online ambassador training, which covers all aspects of the Oceanwise Seafood program and is available in both English and French. In addition, our team works with many of our restaurant partners to provide sustainable seafood talking points that are based specifically on their menus and the species they carry to make it easier for front of house staff to answer customer questions when they ask what the Oceanwise symbol means on a menu. As I mentioned before, we have over 1,300 recommendations. These recommendations change throughout the year based upon new information and updated assessments. We provide these changes in the form of a monthly update to our partners. The great thing about this system is that our partners are constantly learning about different sustainable seafood options as they become available. We like to say that sustainability very much is a journey, and it takes time. So having access to this information helps many of our partners continue to grow the number of Oceanwise options that are on their menu throughout the relationship, with some even receiving the designation of being 100% Oceanwise. Events and fundraisers are another way that we're able to take the science of seafood sustainability and put it into action in an exciting and engaging way. So pictured here is the Chowder Chowdown, which is our annual fundraising event. So this event is only open to Oceanwise Seafood partners. So everyone involved has already made a commitment to promote and sell sustainable seafood. They submit a 100% Oceanwise recommended recipe for chowder, and if they get accepted, they get to compete for the title of Chowder Chowdown Champion. Events like this are important because they allow us to highlight that sustainable seafood is something that is valuable to the hospitality industry and is possible to attain through proper sourcing and partnership with our phenomenal program. Social media is another tool that we utilize to continue to tell the sustainable seafood story. By working closely with influential chefs, we are able to amplify our messaging and reach new audiences that we would not have access to otherwise. We've also had many successful collaborations by creating videos for our partners on sustainable aquaculture, doing social media takeovers to talk about seafood sustainability on our partners' channels, conducting Instagram Live to teach people how to shuck oysters, and provide information on species that chefs are cooking at home while trying to engage with their consumer base throughout COVID. This allows them to tell that positive food story as well as share their passion for ocean conservation at the same time. Now is a really important time to be engaging online, and we really want to make sure that we're supporting our partners during this difficult time, as well as educating audiences as they seek different ways to spend their time. It takes a lot of different actors willing to share information and work together to keep the sustainable seafood movement going strong. Through compassionate chefs and industry leaders, recommendation bodies like Oceanwise, and international collaborations with other ocean-focused not-for-profits, such as the work we do with the Conservation Alliance for Sustainable Seafood Solutions. But together, we can all continue to make change on the water by elevating the importance of sustainable seafood from the ocean and straight to your plate.
There are so many ways that you as a consumer can engage in our program. Look for the Oceanwise logo at restaurants and grocery stores to ensure the seafood you buy is a sustainable choice. You can also support businesses that are doing their part to ensure seafood sustainability. A partner map on our website makes it easy to find them. You can also stay in touch with us and keep learning by signing up for our newsletter. And finally, you can learn more using the tools and resources on our website, like our Seafood Search and Sustainable Seafood Guide. At this point, we're going to wrap things up and turn it over for questions. Thanks so much for your time and attention to our presentation today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I'm feeling excited about sustainable seafood, maybe a little hungry right now. But it was fantastic to get all of that information. And I think the first question that came in during, Rachel, your presentation was that sonic pingers were new to some of our audience members, and are they used often?
Yeah, there is quite a bit. One of the major issues with bycatch, which I highlighted, is that it can be quite dangerous and time sensitive for harvesters to remove captured organisms, like marine mammals, from their nets. And marine mammals are of a size that they can be incredibly dangerous to remove, and they also can cause very expensive damage to nets. So there are two primary ways that people try to avoid that. One is with the use of what are called breakaway panels, which are panels of gill netting within the netting that, if they have a particular amount of force applied to them, will actually split open, which allows marine mammals, things like whales, to just run into the net and pass on through. But the other is the use of pingers, and they're getting increasingly popular surrounding organisms like sea lions and seals, just to let animals know that you're not trying to catch, that there is something there in the water. Because if you think about it, even animals with really good vision aren't going to be able to see a few millimeter thick monofilament net as it hangs in the water. So it's basically this large hidden wall that things don't want to encounter, but can't necessarily see to be able to miss.
Wonderful, thank you. I always love learning something new, and it was great to hear about all those kind of fairly simple modifications that people could be making and incorporating to keep all of those other animals safer. So that was wonderful. I really liked your comment at the end, Isabella, about how important it is to support partners online at this time. And I was wondering if there was a hashtag or things that people should be using to show support for some of your seafood partners.
I mean, we always encourage people to tag us when they're doing their posts. So if you're going to be eating at an Oceanwise seafood restaurant on a patio, perhaps, or getting takeout, maybe, we definitely encourage you to take a photo and to tag Oceanwise Seafood. So we'll be able to promote that as well, and hashtag Oceanwise Seafood as well.
Excellent. I'll type that in the chat in just a moment when we have a few more questions rolling in. So I'll get to that first. So one of the questions about the modifications to some of the fishing gear was, how costly are these? And does that sometimes create a barrier to people implementing them?
Oh, you're on mute, Rachel.
Sorry, guys. So fishing already is a very expensive thing, especially when we're talking about the large-scale industrial fishing, where most of the food that goes up for sale, not for like personal consumption, comes from. So it's in the best interest of those involved to do whatever is going to make things cheapest for them, what's going to have the most economic benefit. And with a lot of the ways to reduce bycatch, they have an economic benefit as well. Because if you're in a country that has specific management surrounding the bycatch, like a minimum bycatch policy that you can only land or bring on board so much bycatch weight before you have to stop fishing, things that you can do to make it so that you're catching less allow you to fish for longer. The same exists when we're talking about marine mammals and other protected species. There are often maximums that are allowed within a fishing season, the maximum number of interactions that are hit. So if you're able to minimize those interactions, you're better off. And a really good example right now that's happening globally is on the eastern coast of the United States, as well as on the western coast of the US and Canada. There have been a lot of interactions recently between whales and fishing gear pots for crab on the west coast and for lobster on the east coast. And it's having major economic impacts because on the east coast specifically, those interactions are happening with an endangered species of whale. And there's large modifications to management, as well as to the allowances to go out of fish that are being done to prevent those interactions from continuing to occur. So there's this massive push in the industry now to find solutions to prevent entanglements, one of which is using a limited number of buoys, so laying your line between traps on the ground for as long as you can so that whales aren't swimming through them, or using breakaway lines where buoys are attached with a line that will break if something swims into it, Or really cool are pop-up buoys, which is a buoy that stays down on the seafloor during the time that the pod is soaking, and then when it's time to be retrieved, it pops up and floats to the surface. So currently, lobster is not recommended by Oceanwise due to the interactions with whales and due to community and government pressure to reduce that mortality of whales. So there's a lot of pressure to make improvements there as well.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear that there are some options out there. And I think with an audience that's here with us today and that will be tuning in to the recordings, what are some ways that they can help apply that pressure? What should people be going out into their communities and asking or doing or saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So it can be really hard, especially in Canada, because the laws that we have in our country for how seafood have to be labeled are pretty minimal. You'll go to the store, or you'll go to a restaurant, and you'll see salmon, and you'll see, cod, but it doesn't tell you what that is, where it was caught, or how it was caught. So, and often, unfortunately, in Canada, it's hard for restaurants and for grocery stores to even have that information because it hasn't been passed through the chain to them. So within Canada and within the US, the ways that you can apply pressure are really just put your money where your mouth is. And if you're in Canada, use Oceanwise recommendations, look for stores and restaurants that are serving Oceanwise seafood, and avoid purchasing things that aren't recommended. If you're in the States, there is some Oceanwise product available as well, but we also have an amazing organization that we do quite a bit of partnership with called the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch Program. And they have a great website and amazing guides, and I think they have an app as well that can talk to you about sustainability. The bar they use to decide what is sustainable and what is not is slightly different. The way Oceanwise works is that we have a binary, you're either Oceanwise or you're not, where Seafood Watch has a stoplight of a best choice, a good alternative, and an avoid. So if you're in the States, you want to focus on buying good alternatives, sometimes best choices as much as you can, and avoiding those avoids as much as you can as well.
And just to quickly add on to that, exactly what Rachel said, I think it's really important to support businesses that are making a conscious choice to understand where their seafood is coming from and making improvements in doing so. So we 100% recommend that you support the amazing chefs that we work with across Canada, as well as retailers and fishmongers. If you're really passionate about seafood, engage in conversation, ask questions. And as Rachel said, if you don't know where it's coming from, maybe you shouldn't be buying it because you don't know what the implications are behind purchasing a species like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there can be some really easy switches too. So shrimp are a species that when they're wild captured, often are incredibly unsustainable just due to the amount of bycatch that's caught in trawls. That said, there are other ways you can harvest shrimp. Like in British Columbia, for example, there's shrimp harvest by trap, which is quite sustainable. And as well, fish farming or aquaculture for shrimp really runs the gamut from being very unsustainable in a lot of places to being incredibly, incredibly sustainable. So an easy switch I made a really long time ago was purchasing Oceanwise shrimp that is from a particular type of fish farming that I know is a good choice and a sustainable choice for us. And it might cost $1 or $2 more a bag, but you don't feel guilty when you eat it, which is definitely worth the payoff there.
Wonderful. That is really good to know because I know a lot of folks kind of stay away from anything that says aquaculture on it. And that is something that education really wanted to address in our recent seafood education kit. And Rachel, you are a really influential part of creating some of those resources. And it's really kind of a great opportunity to have those discussions and tell those stories. So is there any kind of aquaculture or items that are maybe used in aquaculture that our audience can keep an eye out for, kind of dip their toe into that sustainable aquaculture realm?
So I would argue that almost anyone who is eating seafood is eating a fair bit of farmed seafood, and they just might not know it because they're not looking into the specifics of where their food is coming from, which again can be really hard in North America with the way things are labeled. So I would say almost 100% of any clams, mussels, oysters that you are eating at any point in your life are coming from a farm. And those farm species are incredibly sustainable for a number of reasons. Two big ones are that you don't have to feed them. So you take your mussels or your clams or your oysters, you stick them in a bag as little babies, you hang them in the water column, and they eat all of the plankton and other little tidbits that are kind of floating through, which is great because one thing that makes aquaculture primarily of large predatory species that we like to eat, things like salmon, unsustainable is that you have to get them food somewhere, and that food often comes from really unsustainable fisheries. So eating those lower on the food chain aquaculture products is great for that reason. Another really great thing about it is that it actually cleans the water around it because they are filtering all those particles, all the detritus, the little bits of, dead things, all that good stuff out, which delicious. Another really cool thing about the hanging aquaculture for shellfish of the type I described is that it actually creates habitat. So if you're near shore, you have open water. And fish don't love to be in open water because that's where you get eaten by things. So the fact that you have the physical structure of those hanging bags and those ropes in water actually creates habitat, which is great for fish, giving them places to hide and to feed without being worried about something, diving out of the air and picking them off. Isabella, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think you pretty much covered it. That's actually, farmed seafood is a question that we get all the time. People consistently say, as well as businesses that we work with, they ask, how do we address questions from consumers when they say, I refuse to eat farmed seafood? And the reality is they don't necessarily realize the amount of sustainable seafood options they're consuming that do come from farms. So there is a bunch of options that are out there, and it's just a matter of doing a bit of research. But as Rachel mentioned, clams, oysters, mussels are excellent also because they're a really affordable, sustainable seafood option. And they're pretty much on every menu across Canada as an appetizer in some form or not. So everywhere, and delicious, sustainable, and affordable.
Awesome. I'll add one last thing to that, and that is I've now lost it. With aquaculture as well, just thinking about the species you're eating and what it needs to eat, and again, where that food is coming from is a really important thing. And as well as we see, like the global population is not getting smaller. If anything, it is going to continue to grow. And the worldwide pressure on the oceans is not going to get smaller, it's going to get bigger. So choosing sustainable aquaculture is a way that you can, one, take pressure off of wild fish stocks and give them an opportunity to recover, but it's also a way that we can provide protein to people to get them food with this growing population. So it's a really rapidly evolving sector that's very exciting. And I think we all need to give aquaculture a chance just with a bit of homework.
Actually, I will jump in at another one because there's one species that always gets a bad reputation, and it makes me so sad because it's such a sustainable species to farm, and that is tilapia. So depending on tilapia, how tilapia is being farmed, it is a super sustainable species because it's an omnivore. So you can feed it a diet primarily of just vegetables versus having to feed it any sort of protein coming from the oceans, and you're growing a sustainable, clean, very healthy protein. And connecting back to what Rachel said, we are in a world where we're facing a growing global population, and we're going to need to feed a lot more people with less resources. And the best way to do that is to invest in things like eating species that are lower on the trophic level. And maybe let's give a little bit of a shout out to the future of feed formulations that maybe could include insects, another really, really exciting space where we can stop harvesting seafood to feed seafood. Because nobody is going to farm chickens to kill chickens to feed other chickens. Economically, it doesn't make any sense, yet we do it with seafood all the time.
Thank you so much. That is exactly the kind of conversation that I love to start when talking about farm seafood and aquaculture. And I love to see that our audience is saying, yum. They've definitely enjoyed eating tilapia and kind of getting excited about keeping an eye out for some of those other seafood items. I definitely think I'm going to have to go on a hunt for some mussels maybe this weekend in some of our seafood markets. So that's a great thing to keep an eye out for everyone. And as we're just kind of getting close to the end of today's program, I'm definitely going to give one last shout out to our audience. If you have any questions, we're more than happy to squeeze a few more in. And I really kind of want people to feel empowered to take action after tuning in today. One of the things that I like to do is, even when I see the Oceanwise logo on products, is to kind of give a little quiz to the places that I'm eating at or buying seafood from and ask them, what does this mean? Because as you said, Isabella, the servers and everyone should have some idea, and it's okay if maybe they don't. They have a lot going on right now, but it usually kind of gives them that extra nudge to go talk to someone else at that restaurant or seafood market so that they become better informed in the end. So hopefully we'll have lots of, sustainable seafood inspired folks from our audience going out there and asking those great questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And something to keep in mind too for those that are joining us today. We always have a lot of great content coming out through our website and our newsletters, so make sure you sign up for those, especially for recipes. And there's a really fun project that's starting just now that will be finished in the near-ish future. It is Oceanwise Seafood's 15th anniversary, and we're doing a super cool digital cookbook that's going to be available for sale online. So if you're looking for more sustainable seafood options, that will be a great place to find some new and exciting ideas from some of our partner chefs.
Excellent. And you said that will be sent out if you sign up for the newsletter?
I don't believe it itself is going to be sent out, but it will be made available for purchase.
Right, sorry. Notification that it's ready will be sent out if you sign up for the newsletter. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to both Isabella and Rachel. This was a fantastic program today, all about sustainable seafood. And we'd love to hear your final thank yous and shout outs in the chat. Thank you so much to our audience for tuning in. I know that as it gets sunnier and warmer outside, sometimes it's tough to tune in on your computer, but whether you're kind of wrapping up your Thursday evening on the East Coast or taking maybe a little bit of a later lunch break on the Pacific, that it's a great way to kind of tune in. And so we would love for you to share these programs and opportunities with friends and family and kind of help keep spreading the word for us throughout the remainder of the summer. We have plans to be offering the Tales from the Deep live programs throughout the rest of 2020. And so you can always keep an eye out for what's coming up next. And so next week, we are going to be joined by Dr. Peter Ross for a conversation all about plastic pollution in the ocean. So as Rachel was referring to all those filter feeders eating the good tiny particles, Dr. Peter Ross is going to highlight some of the not so good tiny particles that could be out there in the water. Also, if you like a helpful reminder about when the next program is coming up, you can always check out the Facebook events page for Oceanwise, and you'll see weekly reminders and events posted for insights from Oceanwise research. And so you'll see what's coming up next, and it will give you a handy notification. So we'd love to direct you there, and you can share it with friends in your network, as well as kind of get the word out either by following Oceanwise Research on Instagram or Oceanwise Education on Twitter. We do have some exciting more online engagement opportunities coming up this summer. And so Education is really excited to be partnering with Stanley Park Ecology Society to be offering a teen camp all online in the third week of August, so coming up on August 17th. And we're going to be basically giving folks a toolkit of ways to go out into their communities and their neighborhoods and their backyards and get a little bit closer to nature. So if you know any youth 11 to 15 years old, we'd also love for you to help share that opportunity and get the word out to folks. And of course, we love to hear from you and connect with you each week because you are really the reason why we love doing this. And so you can always see what's coming up next in terms of online programs galore by heading to ocean.org/learn-online or following @OceanwiseEDU on Twitter to see what's next. And of course, you may have continued to hear in the media that while the Vancouver Aquarium is thrilled to have reopened our doors here in Vancouver, that we are still looking for continuous community support to help us stay open. And so you can look at some great ways to engage and support by visiting vanaqua.org/saveva/communities to see what's going on. And there's been some fantastic partnerships with Sustainable Seafood Chowder. That's kind of like my favorite way to support Oceanwise is by going out and buying delicious sustainable seafood chowder and eating it. So there's some great opportunities to connect with there. All right, so again, thank you so much to our presenters. Thank you to our audience for joining us. And we'll be waving goodbye and signing out just momentarily.
Thank you for having us.